So, moving on. My goal in this session is to finish up the stuff with the family and then get into the internal ministry issues, which was my initial goal for the day, but I think we'll be all right. So, next, another issue dealing with children in particular is the issue of seeking and receiving attention. Everyone needs to feel like that they have a place and attention from, especially from mom and dad. There's a certain level of security that comes from that. And so just like a wife can become jealous of ministry, children can feel neglected if they're constantly pushed to the back for the sake of the ministry. And for that reason, as much as possible, ministry should be done, I believe, with your family and not apart from them. And you know, we can do visitation together. I know there's some visits they can't go on, but for the most part, my kids started going on visitation when they were, toddlers and in the stroller. And then before long, it became visitation. If we were just putting out literature, became so easy because all I had to do was walk down the street. Kids were like, door, 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 door. I'm like, God bless those children. Sorry. All right, we just picked the paint color for the food truck, by the way, all right? So everyone calm down. Chocolate, dark chocolate. Yeah, I know. That's why you weren't asked.
Yeah, don't come and look at the pew over here.
No. Okay, I thought you meant on the pew.
That's later.
Okay. Stop. All right. We can do visitation together. We can clean the church together. We can do work projects together. And we can enjoy each other as we do them. I don't have to be a jerk. It's important to take training opportunities with your kids and remember that they aren't adult trained laborers. You have to be patient and train them. But you can enjoy doing that together and mess around with each other and whatnot, and have fun together that way. And ministry can bring us together instead of tearing us apart. Right. And because I'm in ministry, I actually have an opportunity to spend more time with my kids than the average guy, because they can do so much of this stuff with me, right? And so I can use that to my children's advantage in helping them with that. So unlike a lot of professions, that gives me the opportunity. So do special things, though, with your kids while you serve together. Just treat them special, for helping, for being a good helper, a good worker. And do special things to enjoy the opportunities provided in ministry. And we already talked about this a bit, about vacations and stuff, and taking time to go see stuff. And my daughter and son-in-law are out in Washington right now, and they had a week to go from Ohio to Wyoming, Sunday to Sunday, and so they stopped along the way and saw Mount Rushmore and things like that, and then they had a week to get from Wyoming to Washington. So Yellowstone National Park and coming up through there, and so I'm getting pictures of the kids and all that, and I'm just like, yeah. I mean, they're not just on a sightseeing tour, but man, praise God. Those kids are building memories, and their families building memories, and they're going to love ministry because it's not like, come on kids, 24 hours in the car and then we get to sit in church all day. So that's how it should be done. Enjoy opportunities. Approach the ministry as much as possible like an adventure with your kids. There's a lot to do, and there's a lot of experiences they get to have. And we always told our kids, man, we get to do this because of the ministry. Every time we did something fun, we always praised that we get to do this because we're in ministry, right? And I never said we have to do this because we're in ministry. When there were hard times, we never said, come on, we have to do it. But when there were good times, we always said, we get to do this because we're in ministry, right? And I just want to be careful with my kids. That's Brother Gibson preaches a message on iniquity, and about how iniquity, and I'm not going to say it like he says it, I'm sure, but because this won't be alliterated. So, but iniquity is a negative attitude toward what's righteous or a positive attitude toward what's wicked. Either way, right? And so I can approach things, doing the right things with the wrong attitude. I'm imparting that attitude to my kids, even if we're doing the right stuff. And if I approach the wrong things with a positive attitude, I'm imparting that attitude toward my kids. Okay? And so I have to be careful in ministry that I'm not imparting the negative attitude about ministry instead of a positive attitude about ministry, and just the way I approach it. Let your children learn to express themselves through ministry. I don't think your kids should be the only ones that do music in the church or the only ones that do this and that, but don't forbid them from serving in the church because they're your kids. And don't force them also. Not every kid is a singer. And not every kid is an in front of people person. And it's okay to not be an in front of people person. It's okay for that kid that's like, hey, I don't like being in front of people. Can I help with sound room or can I help with it? Yeah. Let them learn to serve where God's gifted them and they're comfortable instead of trying to force them into a hole that they don't fit in, right? Just so that they learn to enjoy ministry and it's not something they dread. If they begin to act out, evaluate what attention you've been giving them in honest truth. Not just have they been around, but have you been giving them some attention that they need. Avoid isolating and self-focused activities such as video games and TV as primary source of self-soothing for your children. If you're going to play a video game or watch TV, do it together and interact while you do it, as opposed to, just everybody's zoning out in front of, and this is their focus. I am not a video game person, okay? And I have friends that are, I'm not. All right. But my friends that are do it as an activity with the whole family. That's their thing. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my thing. Okay. At the same time, when I deal with specifically ministry kids who do video game stuff alone all the time, they always have problems. And very frequently they have problems with pornography. Because that type of video gaming is isolating and it's fantasy realm stuff, meaning that it's all about things not being real and not, and so it's a gateway. And as a matter of fact, studies actually have shown that men who play video games, the great majority of the time, if they're involved in pornography and they play video games, they cannot escape the porn addiction without stopping the video game access. And a lot of video games are intentionally, like comic books, there's a lot of absurdly vulgar imagery in them. And I know there's a lot of philosophies. Again, there's a lot of philosophy about this. I don't care about all the philosophies. I care about what actually works. And what I have to deal with in counseling, I can tell you there's some things that don't work. All right. And, we're on the mission field and my kids don't have any other activities. Figure it out. Figure it out. Don't resort to the world being their entertainment and not think that it's going to destroy their thinking. And you set those patterns of thinking in your life and they're very difficult to escape. Okay. And so just be careful about that. And it's not just video games. It can be TV, it can be music, it can be whatever, but be cautious about that. Devotion time builds a family closeness. And so in my Raising Godly Children book, I go through this. I go through every phase of raising kids and how do devotions apply to these phases. But, we started with our kids when they were little, when they were toddlers, not infants as much, but as they started, where they started to talk and stuff and play. I got a blanket and I would throw it out every night on the floor. That was our devotion time blanket. So it made it kind of a special set apart thing. And I would tell them stories. And I just would, elaborate on. And I'm telling them Bible stories, and I'd just elaborate. And then as they started to get a little bit older, I would act them out with them. And I'm talking about through, 6 years oldish, in that range. We're acting stories out still. And I'm Goliath and they're David, and I get killed, or we're all Daniel in the lion's den, and they're the lions, and Dad, and or we're all in the fiery furnace, and I would just tell them stories, and I wasn't. It's like we weren't reading the scriptures together. We would sing some Bible songs. I would tell them a Bible story, and I'd try and make some application for them, right? And then we would pray together, and that was our devotions. And then as they got to be a little over 6 and that range, we shifted to where, okay, we're going to start, Dad's going to read the Bible. We're going to sing some songs. We read the Bible, and we would talk about a little Bible lesson there. And that got progressively more in depth as they got a little bit older. By the time they were teenagers, they were all having their own devotions. And then we would have an assigned reading passage. And I would say, okay, we're reading this chapter. They would all read the chapter. And then at devotion time, it was where we all shared what we got out of that chapter. And that was our devotion time. And we would still sing songs. And then, especially when they became about 11 to 12 years old, we also incorporated reading a chapter of a good book together. All right, because I wanted them to be readers. I wanted them to love books, okay? And so we read, when they were a little, that early, first book we ever did like that was the children's version of Hind's Feet to High Places, which is fantastic. It's really a great book for kids. We just did all kinds of books, but, just books that I felt like they would be interested in. I'm not talking about theology books, okay, but Christian books, okay? And we would read a chapter each night. My kids loved it. They were always looking forward to getting to hear, read the chapter together and stuff. And then, as they became teenagers, when they're having a bad attitude, I say, had your devotions, personal devotions lately? I mean, we're having our family devotions, but you had personal devotions? No. Yeah, it's evident, I can tell, Why don't you go take care of that now, And I don't know how many thousands of times I said that while my kids were growing up, but what was my goal? I'm training them to walk with God. Can I tell you something? There's a lot of ministry kids. I'm stunned at this, but this is a very, very common thing. Lots of ministry kids who did Bible class as part of their curriculum, but never learned how to walk with God personally. And Bible class is not a good substitute for devotions. Okay? Because then spending time with God is academic and, all that. No, it needs to be personal. It needs to be pleasant to spend time with God. So I discussed that a lot in that Raising Godly Children book. But it brings family closeness. And take your kids on daddy dates. Let mama take them out every once in a while, mama dates, And we didn't ever really spend any money because we didn't have any money when our kids were young, which I think is exactly how it ought to be. Honestly, I think the whole culture is messed up. I think you ought to get married younger than you think you should and have more kids than you think you can afford. And I think that's good. But I think you should spend time with your kids on a personal level, just with them, attention to them like you do on a date, And so I'd take my kids to the park. We might stop and get a big gulp or something, 69 cents that we would share, and we would go to the park and, just play around, walk around. When we were in Oregon, I'd let them choose what do they want to do because we had a little more outdoorsy stuff we could do up there for free. And so my boys, they always wanted to go fishing and stuff like that. And so we'd go fishing, or we'd go, go to the look of scenic view area with my girls, and they wanted to go out and hunt mushrooms or different times of the year, things like that we would do. And we'd sometimes do that in family. Sometimes they wanted to do it alone with me, and that's what we do. And it wasn't a cost or anything. It was just time, And the way kids spell love is T-I-M-E. So spend that time with them. Take them on dates. do things together. My boys liked fishing and camping and hiking and all that boy stuff, and so we went and did it. And this is me, because I didn't grow up doing all that stuff. We grew up in western Kansas. There wasn't any of that to do in western Kansas, quite frankly. If you went to a lake in western Kansas, it was you and 10 billion flies on a barren beach, and it's like, this is not funny or fun, and I don't ever want to do this again. But in Oregon, it's not that way. And so my kids, we'd go fishing. I tell you, it was funny one day. We fished for shakers, which are baby sturgeon. They can be anywhere from 18 inches to 42 inches as a baby. And you can't keep their slot fish. You can only keep them if they're over 48 inches and under 60 inches. And you have to have all this. Anyway, so we just fished with a trout pole. Those things, when they hit, man, they come up out of the water shaking like a marlin. And they are awesome to catch. They're really fun. And my kids loved fishing for them, and so we would go down there to the docks, and we would fish right off the dock in town, and because we lived right on the river. And so Seth is my kid that loves fishing the most, but he at that age, I'm casting out. You have to let it sit, and it's a special way that you rig it up and all this, and he can't let that thing sit for nothing, And he's reeling it in. I'm having to cast it out again. Seth, stop reeling. You'll know when something's there. You'll know. I'm just checking, Dad. And no, stop. And it was one of those days. You know the old adage: you can fish or you can take your kids fishing, but you can't do both. That was that day, And so I'm reeling this thing in and casting. He's reeling it in. I'm casting out. Finally, I just said, dude, a fish should have to be a track star to get on your hook. Stop it, And you reel it in again, and I'm not casting it. Well, 2 seconds later, here it is. He said, I need it cast. I'm not casting it. You're done for the day. Everyone else is fishing. You're done. So he goes around, and he just walks down the dock. He's dipping it in, pulling it up. He's walking down the dock. He's like 8, And a few minutes later, he yells, I got one. I'm like, no, you don't. There's no way you have a fish on that line. I got it, Dad. I need help. Come on, help me. And I just didn't believe him. And I said to Jeshua, take the net and go over there if he has something, just, probably just some little bluegill or something like that. Kid caught a 26-inch smallmouth bass. And we get that fish, I get his picture with it and all that, and he's like, Dad, I caught it? How? Patience. It is not true. That's a lie. It is a lie, Stephen. It's not true. Anyway. But those are great times, my kids still talk about going fishing, going camping, going on hikes, and, I about fell off a waterfall one time on a hike, and they still talk about that. But those are those things that, they build memories, and you need to do those with your kids. You need to. They need the attention of their parents. And then, obviously, guard their music. Teach them about the law of musical attraction. Music is this way. We demagogue music a lot, and I'm against worldly music, so don't miss what I'm about to say, but we tend to demagogue it as opposed to teach about it. Okay, so here's the reality of music. As a counselor, when someone comes in and I ask them, what kind of music do you listen to? I'm not asking so I can judge them. What happens is as they tell me what kind of music they listen to, I know automatically what kind of things are in their heart by what they're attracted to. People don't listen to music because of the convenience of music. They listen to certain types of music because it's what is inside of them that they don't otherwise know how to express. And so they're attracted to things that music is an expression of the soul. So they're attracted to it because it seems to express something they feel inside that they don't know how to express otherwise. And that song it strikes a chord, doesn't it, right? That music here or that song there, and it strikes that chord that says, that's how I feel. But here's the deception of music and why Satan uses it is because while I'm attracted to music that expresses what I don't otherwise know how to express, I also will begin to reflect what's present in the music. And so someone that is maybe they're angry and they don't know how to express it, and they're attracted to goth music or screamo or emo or some other O, right? Before long, as they listen to that, they start, wearing black trench coats and combat boots and painting their nails black and mascara. And why? Because it reflected something in them, and then they reflected something in it. It's a give and take mutual thing, right? And so here in Oklahoma, most of the kids are attracted to country music. You can tell it reflects in them. Their belt buckles just grow like that, So, anyway. They've got this auto driving cars now they're releasing. And there's speculation that it won't be long, but there'll be a country song about a guy whose truck left him. So, anyway. Instead of just commanding your kids, don't you dare listen to that music. Teach them about the fact that there are natural attractions to music because of things that are inside of us. And it's not okay to listen to ungodly music and emphasize wrong feelings. Instead, when we find that we have an attraction to music that emphasizes a wrong feeling, we need to go to God and find the solution for those wrong feelings. Music can be a great warning system, okay? Or it can just be one of those forbidden fruits. And you know what they do with forbidden fruits, don't you? They eat them. Yep. So, while we ought to teach about it, and while I don't believe we should let our kids follow after ungodly music, certainly not. And I don't believe we ought to have it in the church. I don't believe the church ever ought to imitate the world. Ever. But at the same time, demagoguery does very little to influence and change. Okay? So we've got to teach, and we've got to view it the right way. All right? All right. So then let's talk about insecurity real quick again. I'm not going to belabor this much because we've talked about insecurity a bit already, but let me talk about what causes insecurity in kids, and that's really what I want to focus on. Just a couple things that cause insecurity in kids. One, when there's conflict in the home. Mom and dad fighting is one of the number one sources of insecurity for kids because their sense of personal security largely hinges on the stability of the relationship between their mom and dad. And by the way, that can last your entire life. I know people that have been in my counseling office because their parents got divorced at age 40 when they were 40. And it shook their world so hard, they had to come to counseling. Right? At 40 years old. And we might go, well, there's something wrong with them. No, it's like that was where the large part of their security and identity came from. And then when that got rocked, it's like, well, who am I then? All this time I thought this, and now I don't even know. Maybe I'm going to end up divorced, and all of those things. That conflict in the family can cause lots of insecurity. All right, number two, separation from loved ones. Most people in ministry don't live near their families, their extended families. Grandma and grandpa aren't close. Aunts and uncles aren't close. Sometimes that can be a good thing, right? That's from our perspective, right? But sometimes it's not a good thing. My grandkids just started on deputation with the family. They're having a good time right now, but they're still here. There's going to come a point when they go over to Europe, and grandma and grandpa aren't going to be there. And they've grown up their whole life. They've seen me every service. They come over to my house and they spend the night at my house anytime that they want. Okay? And that separation can create an insecurity in us because it's part of who we are. It's part of our identity. Okay? And that security coming from those relationships. Change itself creates insecurity. Whenever there's major changes in life, it's insecure points in life that, even if it's like, okay, we're changing as a minister. Hey, God's called us to go pastor this church over here, right? Well, I've got to leave all my friends. For a kid, leaving your friends is one of the most devastating things you can do as a kid. It's like, it's huge. And Dad's like, well, we're just following God, and you guys got to suck it up. You'll find new friends. That is not how you feel as a child. Right. It is devastating. And especially if you're going to a small church or starting a church where there are no other kids. Okay, that change. It can even be such that literally changing from elementary school to junior high or junior high to high school or middle school, some places do it different, okay? That change. You go from being the big fish to the little fish, and there's an insecurity that can be, that can happen in that. Number 4, rejection. Rejection can be overt. Someone saying, you're pretty worthless. By the way, don't ever say those things, even if in jest. Don't even say, man, you're worthless. I'm just kidding with you. Amen. Devil uses those things. Okay? Don't ever do that. But that's an overt type rejection. But there's some that have it even worse, where parents have told, I wish you'd have never been born. You were a mistake. Right? That's wicked, wicked, wicked. Amen. But then there's also a covert rejection. Covert rejection is where you overparent, helicopter parent, and the kid doesn't feel like you trust them at all to do anything. Like, you don't even trust me to cut the meat on my plate. Seriously, I'm that inept. You think I'm that dumb that I can't do simple things? And that can be a covert rejection, a rejection that's felt in the sense of, I'm just not good enough. I'm not smart enough, kind of thing. I was teaching on that several years back out in a regional conference, and I said that. And I said, these insecurities can lead. And there was a lady there who her son was 13, and she was still cutting his meat. And so she told my wife later, she said, we had a kind of a weird night last night. What happened? She said, well, Brother Carter preached on that, not, your kids feeling like that. So I've cut my son's meat all these years. And so last night we served chicken. I didn't cut it. And I served his plate. And he said, Mom, you didn't cut my meat. And I just looked at him. I didn't really know what to say. So I just said, well, I don't want you to be a drug addict. It's not a straight line between those two things, but, it can happen. So, anyway. So rejection. And then let me say this about insecurity. Most people experience a natural insecurity during puberty, which can start sometimes as early as 8 because of all the hormones in our food and stuff, and sometimes as late as like 14-ish, depending on the kid and all of that type of stuff. And it's during those ages that insecurity can really cause us to start reaching out for things to produce false security in our life. Okay? And those are danger points, which is why it's very important for you to build a close, open communication with your kids prior to 8. And then maintain that as they go through that puberty phase, especially. Don't give Satan access during that time. Okay? And if you have an open communication where your kids know, we did every week we had family conference table on Saturday. And family conference table was where everyone got to sit around and you could tell anything that you needed to tell without getting disciplined. Family conference table. Now, if you didn't tell and I found out, we could be having discipline. But if there was something that needed to be told, family conference table gave everyone an opportunity to share it. And you weren't allowed to make accusations or talk about other people. It was only about yourself. Okay? And there was not, now there might be instruction of, okay, well, what do we need to do about that? How can we fix it? And so forth. But that's an opportunity for them to just be right and stay right. And there was no judgment in it and condemnation in it. Okay? But because of that, my kids learned that they could tell me anything. They could tell mom anything, and they do. They did, and they do. Okay, and not on their personal life, that's not so much now, but still yet, there was nothing that my kids didn't, people would be like, well, something, such and such about your kid. And I'm like, yeah, I already know. Well, how would you know? They told me. Because we're close, and, we dealt with it, and so forth. So that openness has to be there, especially when they're teens. Satan will take advantage of that if you don't develop it. All right, then this is the last one on kids. Secondary counselors. Your kids are going to seek counsel from somewhere. And if you don't provide them counselors, they will seek it from friends and internet and social media and secular influencers. They are going to seek. I know that you want them just to believe everything you tell them. And if you do things right, for the most part, they will. But they are going to wonder what other people think about stuff. And there are going to be times that they want to know. And especially as they get to teenage years. So I believe it's important to give your kids permission to seek counsel and provide them with good counselors to go to. Here's some counselors I approve of. And the way I did with my kids is, here's some people you can talk to, and you don't even have to ask my permission to talk to them. If you want to find out what they say, go to them. Now, I'm always available. We have a conference table. I'm always available to talk to you. I'm always willing to give you counsel. But I'm okay with you getting counsel outside of me from these people. That way they know they don't have to go try and find counselors on their own, because they're going to get bad counselors. So that could be, it could be a good godly deacon or deacon's wife in your church. It can be another pastor that you go, I think he's a good godly man. He's going to give godly counsel. Pastor's wife. It could be a biblical counselor. Those type of things. But giving them permission to know that they can go get counsel and giving them outlets for that is incredibly helpful to them, because it eases their mind that, it's not a one source. I just have to believe everything dad says or mom says. And here's the thing, when they go get that counsel, they find out, they say the same thing as dad. Then there's that reinforcement there. Okay, so there is a natural tendency for kids to ask questions, seek questions, and I'm not going to get into this part. I get into a lot more detail on this in the Raising Godly Kids book. But part of giving counsel is giving explanations. I'm just going to throw this out there, and I'm not even going to spend hardly any time on this. But my kids, when they started puberty, we had a biological discussion that was very detailed. I explained how the body works completely, including conception and childbirth and everything. I explained it all. And my kids would come to me as teenagers like, Dad, you would not believe the dumb stuff some kids say. I'm like, yeah. I said, we told them, we don't need to talk about that, but you're wrong, And I'm like, yeah. You know why? Because they don't know anything. And everything that they learn from bad counselors and bad sources. Right? And there are kids that they're going to meet on bus ministry or in Sunday school or deacons' kids and stuff like that, missionary kids, that are literally going to make stuff up to sound cool. And they don't know any different because they've never been taught or instructed. And I do believe it's important to do that. And that's all the further it went. When they became preteen, and I told them, though, you ever have questions? You ever hear something different? You have questions? Just come talk to me about it. I want them to know. Okay? I don't want the devil to have false influence and counselors giving them false information. So, and then before they got married, I sat down and I had conversations on intimacy with them. Now, I'm going to give you a recommendation for a book. I heard this in February. I got this book. best book I've ever read on intimacy, bar none. Biblical Lovemaking. That's the title of the book, Biblical Lovemaking. It's a study on the Song of Solomon. Oh my goodness. I read that book, and Angela, I don't remember where we were. We were on a trip. We were in North Carolina, and I had gotten it. I'm reading it as we're going on this trip, which is not one you want to pull out in the middle of the airport or something. So, hotel. So I'm reading this book, and I'm just like, man, wow, I didn't know that. And we've been married 30 years, and I'm going, that's good. And she's over there going, literally, she's like, oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And I just told her, I'm like, honey, it's not a huge book, okay? It literally is a study on the Song of Solomon. And I said, you got to read this. And so she's, okay, so she gets the book after I'm done with it. You got it right there? Yeah, that's what it looks like right there. So she gets the book. Where'd you get that at? Oh, you just had it with you? Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Telling you. It's a great book, isn't it? Yep. So anyway, so she starts reading it, and she's sitting over there while she's reading. She goes, "Wow, interesting," and so she's like, "You were right. It's a great book. I'm just serious. It's a fantastic book." And but before my kids got married, now I didn't know about that book before 3 of my kids were already married. So. But I sat down with them, and I had discussions with my kids about intimate behavior and the processes. I didn't discuss that when they were teenagers. I discussed the biology. But lovemaking in a marriage is more than just the action. Okay. And I discussed that with them, but I also discussed the processes of the action because I wanted my kids to enjoy their marriage. And I told them, I said, I know this is going to be awkward to talk with us about, but I don't want you to feel like you have to go to the world to find out about these things. Because if you go to porn, you're going to see a crazy distorted picture. It's ridiculously distorted. So I told my kids, here's how to please your spouse. Here's what things you need to know. And number one is you got to talk, But I told them some details about things to talk about, things to do, and things like that. And not in a dirty way, you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to help my kids have I want them to start their marriage in a healthy and a productive way, and I want them to enjoy their spouse. God wants us to enjoy each other. And but I highly, highly recommend that book. That's an excellent, excellent book. Okay, so I'm not going to go into any more detail on that, but I do discuss a little bit about that without getting, again, not too deep in it in the Raising Godly Children book. I talk about that a little bit. Okay. All right. Let's take our break, and then when we get back, we're going to get into internal ministry issues the rest of the day.